Hi there, all you beautiful internet people. Welcome back to another spicy review. Today we're going over one of the oldest formats of the television medium, that being the humble sitcom. Now, there are a lot of good sitcoms, most of them from the golden age of sitcoms, the 70s, 80s, like Welcome Back, Kotter, or Taxi, or Too Close for Comfort, Three's Company, WKRP in Cincinnati. But the ones I'm talking about today are the more modern ones that don't seem to get that sitcoms are like dead. As a cultural milestone, sitcoms just don't really exist anymore. And that's not to say that there can't be some really great sitcoms today, like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, or Curb Your Enthusiasm, or New Girl. All those are fun, and I'm not here to hate on those. So if you're big into, like, you know, Always Sunny, I'm not going to brag on you for that. It's got Danny DeVito, and like a show with Danny DeVito isn't going to be bad. What I'm talking about here is the absolute bottom of the barrel in terms of modern type sitcoms. We have two old sitcoms on here, but I think you'll agree with me that these older sitcoms they kind of led to what we see in today's sitcoms. So let's get right into it. I've arranged it into a little bracket list here. I'm not used to these at all. This is my first time ever doing one of these. I never participate in March Madness or anything, but it's not rigged. I don't know which one I'm going to choose as the worst sitcom of all time. Just most of them are from like the past 20 years. I've often said that Seinfeld is the last authentically good sitcom that also was like a cultural thing that everyone cared about. There hasn't been a sitcom like that since, and I don't think there ever will be, and that's okay. But here are some shows that have tried to keep it going, or just some shows that are authentically abysmal. So let's get right into it here. What's the worst sitcom of all time? We're about to get into some bracketing action here. Let's do this thing. Alright, first up on the list, we got The Office squared off against Modern Family. Which of these is worse? I remember having to sit through episodes of Modern Family all the time back in like 2015 because it was on and everyone was like, let's watch Modern Family, and I'm like, no, let's not. But Modern Family is just one of the worst fucking sitcoms, and both of these, The Office and Modern Family, do that annoying fucking mockumentary thing where you pretend like, oh, we're being followed around by a camera crew. And don't get me wrong, mockumentaries are fun. They're a fun genre, but they're not sitcoms. Those are two different things. And when they're paired up together, it just becomes like confusing and bad. So Modern Family is an example of like one of the most pandering shows I think I've ever seen. You got Sofia Vergara, who's not funny.
Hobby, how about some girl before we turn on the NASCAR?
You have the two gay guys whose only joke is that they're gay. Really offensive to LGBTQ type stuff. And, just like, I guess the gimmick with this one that's supposed to separate it from all the other sitcoms is that this family is composed of like 5 separate families. I don't give a shit, none of them are interesting. So, but against The Office. The Office is a horrible sitcom, and everyone in it except Steve Carell is only known for being in The Office. And I hate relatable work humor, because it's just such a... I feel excluded by it, and I'm not able to laugh with these characters. And the characters don't even laugh because they're miserable all the time because they work in a job they hate. So, gosh, The Office versus Modern Family, what a dilemma. I mean, The Office is horrible. Steve Carell is not funny. The man has never been in a funny movie in his life.
Hello, Wendy.
I have to go with The Office. The Office is... Let me write it here. The Office. The Office beats out Modern Family just because The Office, I think, came earlier, obviously, and so it's a more influential show. The Office is the bane of the internet. You can't go a single day on the internet without hearing about the fucking Office, and I don't think that's the case with Modern Family. It's kind of just a niche for sitcom fans. Really awful show, though. Really fucking bad. The thing's abysmal. Alright, next up we got the two older shows I mentioned earlier. Leave It to Beaver versus MASH. On the one hand, you have possibly the most boring sitcom ever with Leave It to Beaver. Just like while The Honeymooners was doing groundbreaking shit for the 50s, and I Love Lucy was doing groundbreaking shit for the 50s, and you got Leave It to Beaver, which is like even less interesting than like Father Knows Best, and that's just kind of sad. Like, look at the Patty Duke show. She's her own identical cousin, that's an interesting premise. What's the premise for Leave It to Beaver? Oh, there's a kid, and he has a brother, and he does kid shit. I don't care. Leave It to Beaver's horrible.
We saw you. You were kissing her. Yeah, Beav. We saw you.
On the other hand, we have MASH, which is a horrible adaptation of Robert Altman's movie, without Robert Duvall or Robert Altman or any of the things which made the movie like kind of good. And it wasn't even an Apocalypse Now or Full Metal Jacket to begin with, but at least it was only 2 hours. This shit is about the Korean War, a conflict which lasted only 2 years but spans 10 years and features 70s haircuts that are supposed to be in the 50s. And its cast is some of the most humorless comedians I think I've ever seen. Like, there's not one funny person on this show.
I mean, the Army's supposed to... It's supposed to make a man out of you, isn't it?
Well, it depends which sex you are to start with. I mean, you have to meet them halfway.
Jamie Farr isn't funny. Alan Alda isn't funny. No one's funny. Garrett Berghoff isn't funny. MASH is bland and boring, and it's about a bunch of miserable people living in a war, and they don't like it, and they're just complaining all the time, and I mean, fuck MASH. I gotta say MASH. MASH is worse than Leave It to Beaver, because Leave It to Beaver is the kind of harmless drivel that, you really don't mind after a while. It just kind of passes through. But MASH, like, if you watch every episode of MASH, you'll go insane. You'll go off the rails if you sit through every single episode of MASH. That stuff is just unwatchable. Next up, we got Two Broke Girls versus The Big Bang Theory. I remember seeing Two Broke Girls once. It was like walking on broken glass, because I think Two Broke Girls is kind of the result of the kind of fake feminism that you saw in like The Sweetest Thing with Cameron Diaz, where it's just like, well, this must be feminist because it has women in it. But Two Broke Girls loses out because it's just so fucking offensive and lazy, and all the jokes are shit jokes, and
It's right. Oh! I touched it! Gross!
so bad. Two Broke Girls is the worst. It's just bad. It's just abysmal. On the other hand, you have The Big Bang Theory. I'm not a woman, obviously, so Two Broke Girls doesn't really offend me as a woman. If you're a woman, it will offend you as a woman, but I'm autistic, so I'd say The Big Bang Theory is a lot more... It's a lot more offensive for me in that regard.
I finally reconciled the black hole information paradox with my theory of string network condensates.
Also because all the main characters are a bunch of misogynistic creeps who constantly harass the female characters with no repercussions, I think The Big Bang Theory would also be offensive to you if you're a woman, or if you're just someone with a decent set of ethics. So I'd say The Big Bang Theory definitely beats out Two Broke Girls because it's just a really, like, it has a lot more cultural influence, much like how The Office beat out Modern Family. I'm not only grading these on, like, how bad they are to watch, but, like, how bad their impact on future sitcoms are, and how big and how awful their influence on, like, the cultural, like, what's expected to be in a sitcom. So Broke Girls is kind of like the antithesis of something fun like New Girl, where it takes, like, you know, the 60s charm and naivety of, like, that girl, you know, with, like, Marlo Thomas and puts Zooey Deschanel in the role, which is absolutely charming and fun and a good feminist show. And then you have something like Two Broke Girls, which is just they're not even broke, they're just like, they're not in poverty, they just work at a Dunkin' Donuts or something. Abysmal. Terrible shit. Alright, we got the Goldbergs versus Young Sheldon. The Goldbergs is like Stranger Things, but less well remembered. It's every fucking 80s reference crammed into just like 30 minutes. Like you go from, remember Ghostbusters, remember Predator, remember this shit and that shit.
We're literally the coolest men alive.
Roger that.
And it's based off this guy's actual childhood growing up in the 80s, but he puts so much shit in here that, I mean, it's obviously all just made up, because, like, nobody had this much 80s shit going on in the 80s. The Goldbergs is really bad nostalgia bait for, I guess, just 80s people. I don't know. What is it about the 80s that makes their nostalgia so, like, rancid? You know, you don't see that with the 90s, so I don't know what it is with the 80s. Young Sheldon. The Goldbergs versus Young Sheldon. Do I include Young Sheldon or the Goldbergs to pass on to the next round? I would have to say, without a doubt, Young Sheldon. It is infinitely more offensive than something like the Goldbergs, which is just like harmless, you know, I was in the 80s. Young Sheldon also tries to be nostalgic in a sense, but the problem is that the butt of the joke is always this young autistic kid who's unlikable, and everyone around him is unlikable. He's an annoying, like, tech-obsessed brat, and then everyone around him is this religious fundamentalist nutjobs.
Here's a cool fact for you. A lot of famous scientists believed in God.
Who, like, down with the gays and no abortion, and so there's no one you can identify with, because Sheldon is a little dipshit and everyone around him are big dipshits, so it's like, yeah, Young Sheldon easily beats out the Goldbergs. Alright, next up, we got Friends, we got Home Improvement. Friends is insufferable. It's the anti-Seinfeld, whereas Seinfeld is a funny show with great actors and just stellar writing. Friends is like, if Seinfeld influenced later shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm and Always Sunny, then Friends influenced like Modern Family and like that. And yeah, Friends is just bad. Like, the debate always goes, which is better, Friends or Seinfeld, in terms of like the big two 90s comedies? And like the answer's obvious, it's Seinfeld. Because Seinfeld's a comedian, and everyone in the show is also comedians, and then Friends is just a bunch of random, like, actors just pulled together, and they're like, hey, let's be friends.
You waited too long to make your move, and now you're in the friend zone.
It's just mental. So I'm gonna and then Friends is going up against Home Improvement. I don't like Home Improvement. I don't like Tim Allen, and Tim Allen is not funny, and his style of I'm a man, that kind of comedy just it was boring in the 90s, and it's outdated now.
I'm building my own log cabin. Oh.
And gosh, Friends or Home Improvement? I'm gonna have to go with Home Improvement, because Friends at the very least has something that you might be able to call jokes. If you're watching it, like, you know, casually, you might laugh at some bits. But Home Improvement is a show utterly devoid of humor. It's crazy how unself-aware it is, and just a bland waste of your time. All right, next up on the roster, we got 30 Rock versus Community. 30 Rock is a show which I remember seeing quite a bit during its original run, and the premise is just so bad. Like, hey, let's take these really funny people off SNL and let's make it boring. You know, the reason people watch SNL, and the reason I fucking love SNL, is because it's the only sketch comedy show currently airing. There were a lot of them back in the 90s, but SNL's the only one left. So when you take the one thing that makes SNL fun and interesting, you know, the novelty of seeing all these new sketches that are independent of one another and just fun little 5-minute ditties, and then you turn that into a bloated sitcom with continuity and shit, it just ruins it. It just sucks the charm and appeal out of SNL. So 30 Rock is in many ways like the anti-SNL.
I'm setting fire to my own desert.
You're insane.
Am I?
They don't even get the funniest people who are on SNL at the time. They got like Tina Fey, who's moderately funny, Tracy Morgan, who's really funny if he's given something to do, and Alec Baldwin, who's never even been a real cast member on SNL, and who is possibly one of the least funny comedians around today. He's the boss baby. So 30 Rock is boring. And then on the other side of things, we have Community, which is Dan Harmon's live-action sitcom, so it has the same type of horrible sensibilities you find in Rick and Morty and that kind of thing, and everything else Dan Harmon's ever worked on. The absolute king of cringe in the 2010s. Community is about a bunch of people at a community college, and they are sad and depressed, and you get the whole bit. It's the same problem with it's the same exact problem with MASH and The Office, and like sitcoms are supposed to be fun, you know. Like, you can have characters with problems, but like when they're all just a bunch of 20-somethings moping around, that's not interesting. Come on.
Oh, it's these presents you've obviously sent to yourselves to make it look like you have girlfriends.
So Community is, gosh, 30 Rock versus Community. This is going to be a toughie, because, I mean, on the one hand, 30 Rock takes Tracy Morgan and sucks all the Brian Fellows out of him until there's, like, nothing funny about any of it. 30 Rock is really, really bad, and that's such a shame, because Tina Fey is a great comedian. On the other end, you got Community, which is just about Dan Harmon paying for a college experience he really didn't need, and then trying his best to justify the expenditure by turning it into a relatable sitcom and being like, well, that was a waste of my life, but at the very least, I was able to make a show out of it, which is like, you can make a show about cooler shit than your experience at community college. While 30 Rock is bad, it at least benefits from the presence of funny people in it, like Tina Fey and Tracy Morgan. Alec Baldwin isn't funny, he doesn't count, but Tina Fey's funny. Community has none of that, so I'm going to have to go here with Community. Community is just awful. Next up, The Good Place versus Superstore. The Good Place is a show about what it would be like if you were dead and there was an afterlife. As an atheist who doesn't believe there is an afterlife or anything, this show holds nothing for me. But even if you are a religious person or you believe in an afterlife, this show is not good. It features Ted Danson giving his best Eugene Levy impression, and it's essentially like the 1990s comedy Stay Tuned with John Ritter and Pam Dawber, but without John Ritter and Pam Dawber, and without the funny TV homages that made Stay Tuned such a blast to sit through. The Good Place is about as thought-provoking as like your deep emo friend who sits on the couch and drinks G Fuel all day. And you know, I say everything's emo, but I think The Good Place is the kind of shit that can only come about in a society that is woefully like deprived of ideas. Like, they have an episode of The Good Place that's literally just about the trolley problem.
Made the trolley problem real so we could see how the ethics would actually play out.
I don't know how many more times in my life I'm going to hear about this shitty trolley problem, but like, I'm so sick of hearing about it. Please make it stop. On the other end, we got Superstore. Superstore is like The Office, but for retail instead of management. Instead of watching people work in a boring office job, you see people work in a boring retail job.
8 o'clock tonight?
I can't say no!
Same kind of relatable comedy shit that's been plaguing everyone since like the fucking mid-2000s, and I for one am really sick of this kind of thing. Please just, what happened to days of like Sanford and Sons, where you follow like people with an interesting occupation, like the owner of a junkyard, you know? That's the kind of job I'm interested in seeing on TV. If I wanted to see a depressed Walmart employee, I'd just go down to Walmart. Superstore is utterly abysmal. But I have to say The Good Place actually beats Superstore out. Because, well, Superstore is drivel about boring people in a boring situation. The Good Place is more offensive by being about extraordinary circumstances and extraordinary things, but still managing to turn that into like a boring office job that's relatable and comprehensible to the average moron. And I think that's something that theology should not strive to do, is to make it boring, because like going to church is already boring enough. The last thing I need is to think that Ted Danson is God or the devil or whatever. Also, I just don't believe in the concept of sin. I don't think that there's any action which is like arbitrated to be inherently good or evil by any universal authority. So I personally take offense to The Good Place. It's not only a really bad show like Superstore, it's a really like offensive show to me as an atheist. It's condescending. It's I'm 14 and this is deep type material. It's bad. Finally, we have Last Man Standing versus Saved by the Bell. Last Man Standing is the kind of bastard child of Home Improvement in that Tim Allen still thinks it's funny for him to be this raving misogynist character, which is actually just Tim Allen. He's actually just a raving misogynist.
Big change, huh? But it'd be awkward talking to me about it. You know, I've had a lot of conversations with your sisters.
Get out!
And I think, for one, that it's great that he's not in the new Buzz Lightyear movie, because I think that having Tim Allen as a role model is really not the smartest choice. I mean, the guy has a track record that would put O.J. Simpson to shame. The Last Man Standing recently ended, and I missed out on watching the final broadcast of Tim the Toolman Taylor's great legacy. And he'll probably be in another sitcom pretty soon. He just keeps trying his hand at this shit. But Last Man Standing is essentially a misogynist joke you'd hear at a party, but stretched out over the course of like 50 episodes, or I don't know how many episodes there are. I don't watch it, but it's set in Denver, which is especially offensive to me. Tim Allen is from Denver. He's a Coloradan, but the show does not feel like it's set in Denver at all, and it's about him, and he has a wife, and then the gimmick is that he's a hyper-emasculated grunter, but then he has 3 daughters, and he has to handle, like, growing up with daughters, and he's like, oh no, my fertile man seed did not sire a male heir, and it's just unbearable. Like, Tim Allen is off the deep end at this point, and Last Man Standing is a sad testament to just how far he'll go to stay relevant or have people know who he is, which I guess it's worked. Everyone knows who Tim Allen is 20 years after Home Improvement, which is weird to think about. Last Man Standing is put up against Saved by the Bell, which is the eponymous teen comedy, and I'm including it on here. I'm not including like iCarly or High School Musical. Is that a sitcom? I don't know. I don't watch shit made for babies, but I'm putting Saved by the Bell on here because I feel like it's also something a lot of adults watch. It's not good. Saved by the Bell is like, it is a very historically significant show in that it essentially invented the Disney Channel type sitcom where you have a bunch of quirky youngsters going around and being wacky.
Night.
Oh, wait, Kelly. Oh, come on, Kelly.
I have to say it's better than like Hannah Montana. Again, none of those are on this list because teen sitcoms and animated sitcoms could be their own entire bracket thing in themselves. But Saved by the Bell, I gotta go with Last Man Standing here because I mean Tim Allen is just so. He's just so bad. He's just so not funny. And Saved by the Bell, while it is horrible, it's a really awful, just nothing show. It at least is like, nostalgic, I guess. If someone says, I'm nostalgic for Saved by the Bell, I can be like, okay, I guess. Alright then, moving on to round 2. We got The Office versus MASH. This is a battle of the titans. It is really hard to figure out which is worse. A show that lasted way too long and is about boring people just whiling their lives away for no reason other than to make money because they're so fucking boring and lame, or a show about people in a war who are boring and lame and complain about, I don't want to be in this war. All you have to do is, like, Klinger wears a dress all the time, right? And he wants to get discharged because he doesn't like it.
Terrific outfit, Klinger. Like it? I don't usually wear floor length during the day, but once in a while you feel like being dressy.
But wearing a dress obviously isn't going to get him discharged so long as he still does all his army shit. So all he needs to do is just, like, hit someone in the face or, like, leave or go AWOL and instant discharge. Dishonorable discharge, sure, but, like, it doesn't want to be there. Nothing's holding him back from just, like, locking himself in a room and not doing anything that anyone tells him to do, and he'd be sent back home instantly. But his big idea is, like, I'll get in a dress, which is also just, like, outdated. You know, it's not transphobic, but, like, come on, you can do better than that. The Office versus MASH. Which one is worse? They're, like, so boring and awful and cringe-inducing, and I can't stand either of them. But I am going to have to go here with The Office, because The Office is it's just a whole nother level. And whereas MASH at least thinks it's funny, I think deep down the people behind The Office were so soulless and cynical, they knew nothing they ever put down would ever be like a joke.
Okay, so Dwight, in your own words, someone replaced all my pens and pencils with crayons.
The Office is worse than MASH. I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is what happens when you pit, like, the worst of the worst against each other. That is a battle of the titans. I did not expect that. We got The Big Bang Theory versus Young Sheldon. Ooh, 2 shows set canonically in the same timeline. I'm gonna go with The Big Bang Theory because not only did it last longer, at least in relation to Young Sheldon so far, you know, I think The Big Bang Theory is one of those shows that really just punches you in the gut. It just hits you again and again and again with the most repetitive, boring stereotypes known to man.
Big deal is that nobody touches food on my plate.
And I do not like this show. Young Sheldon is its own separate can of worms, but it's bad in the kind of way that only a spin-off of an even worse show can be bad. Like,
I may not always recognize sarcasm, but I sure know how to use it.
It's only bad because its predecessor set the bar so abysmally low. Like, The Big Bang Theory is the death of comedy, so I'm gonna put The Big Bang Theory here. I'm gonna put The Big Bang Theory over Young Sheldon. There we go. Alright. Now we got Home Improvement versus Community. This is quite the question here. When it comes to Home Improvement, I have to say that it has kind of had a lot of references to it, like, to, you know, Wilson's behind the fence and we can't see him, and that's the joke.
You were being a peacock. Yeah,
Tim, the Toolman Taylor is with his tools, which, in retrospect, is the kind of deranged concept that only Tim the Toolman Taylor could come up with, because it's so stupid to think of Tim Allen hosting a tool show. That's the worst concept I've ever heard, but Community is worse. I'm giving this one to Community. A show about this misogynistic chauvinist who plays around with buzzsaws and shit is marginally above a show that is just people at college being fucking boring for 30 minutes straight.
You're like the exact opposite of an antioxidant. Yeah,
I got band practice late.
And Dan Harmon is just able to use all his connections that he doesn't warrant to get like LeVar Burton and John Goodman on and ruin their filmographies. Like, come on, Community. I gotta give Community. Community's worse than Home Improvement, okay? Community is the worst show ever set at college. It's the worst show that will ever be about college. It's a whole new level of depraved. Alright, now we got The Good Place versus Last Man Standing. Again, I can't say Tim Allen's worse. So Tim Allen lucked out on this one, because Tim Allen he tries, you know.
You know, she's got you there, honey.
Like, The Good Place has Ted Danson, who's an established guy in his own right, but he's only funny on Cheers, and after Cheers he hasn't been anything worth talking about. He's in an episode of Tim and Eric's, for gosh sakes. So, between Last Man Standing and something as, like, gut-wrenchingly horrible as The Good Place, I have to say The Good Place. The Good Place is really bad. It should be called The Bad Place. Of course, there is The Bad Place in the show, but it's just insulting how they call this shit like The Good Place and The Bad Place, as if this isn't just the result of the boring, standard, wonder-bred Christian dichotomy that's been set up. You know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see a sitcom version of the Hindu afterlife. That should be interesting, but when you just have The Good Place and The Bad Place, and we're not calling them heaven and hell because we don't want to admit that we're a bunch of, like, self-serving, Protestant-centric weirdos.
As you approach the kill switch, I will begin to beg for my life.
Then The Good Place, come on. Alright, here we go. And like, how a show this religious, pushing this much religious propagandist bullshit gets by in this enlightened day and age, I'll never be able to figure out, but I guess it does that because it pretends like it's deep, and like there's so many thought experiments about shit, but come on, it's just Christianity. Real Battle of the Titans now. We got The Office versus The Big Bang Theory, and gosh, The Office, this is worse than The Office versus Smash. The Office versus The Big Bang Theory, round 3, and this is impossible to choose. Like, I hate these shows so much with a fiery passion. I have been on record just dumping on these shows and using them as a punchline constantly. I will compare things I don't like to The Office, and I will compare things I don't like to The Big Bang Theory in equal measure, and gotta give it to The Office, because I just feel like at this point there is something almost charming about The Big Bang Theory, in that it is a show so awful that, like, in 20 years I might actually look back at it and go, like, at least I was there to see this happen.
You have 2 strikes. 3 strikes and you're out. It's a sports metaphor.
With The Office, that's not the case. I've never seen The Office on TV or anything, so, you know, just pop up and, like an old familiar adversary, it slaps you in the face and kicks you in the balls. That's never happened for me with The Office. The Office is just a really bad show that I have no personal connection to.
I messed up my hair.
Whereas The Big Bang Theory, I've been able to bond with it over its horrible depictions of autism, its ridiculously bad character development, its horrible sets that look like they're off fucking iCarly, and yeah, I gotta say The Office is worse, just by virtue of that. Like, I can make fun of The Big Bang Theory for hours, but The Office is a show that's so lifeless and dead that you'd have a hard time actually making fun of The Office. There's almost nothing to pick apart. It's just a show about boring people having a shitty time, and that's the entire show. So, I'm gonna give this one to also just because, like, The Big Bang Theory has a concept that had not been done before. It was able to capitalize off geek culture, and I like comic books. Hey, I like math.
I should note, I'm having some digestive distress.
But The Office doesn't even have that. It's literally just a show about people sorting staplers and shit, and you'd have a more fun time watching paint dry. Like, you can't even hate watch The Office. It's not even a so bad it's good thing. It's just a snooze fest through and through. Alright, round 3. We got Community versus The Good Place. And I'd say the main difference between these two is The Good Place has Ted Danson.
There have to be stakes, or it's just another thought experiment.
And Community doesn't. Community has nobody worth watching, even like for nostalgic reasons. Dan Harmon is just able to get LeVar Burton on one episode because he has more money than he knows what to do with, and will have too much money until the end of time, given the fact that he is a man without humor, devoid of humor, in fact. Community does for a community college what The Office does for office workers.
I had relations with my high school boyfriend. We did it to Madonna's erotica on the floor of his walk-in closet, but...
And it just makes me, again, like, miss shows like Taxi, where writers had to be like, well, let's make a show about an interesting job that's not just the job that most people already have, like a taxi depot. Let's come up with crazy characters like Jim Ignatowski who hang out at the taxi depot, and Latka, you know. Let's come up with fun, novel situations that nobody's seen before. The Good Place kind of has a novel situation. It's the first sitcom made about how to be a good Christian boy and avoid the sin. Or Ted Danson's the devil, and he's gonna eat you alive. You know, just this horrible premise, horrible. But Community is even worse, and that's a shame because, like, community college is a lot better than normal colleges in many ways. I wouldn't set a sitcom there. It's just a college. Like, what are you gonna build jokes off of? Freaking, like. It's worse than The Big Bang Theory, because The Big Bang Theory is like a show about college, but it also has a gimmick, like a thing that sets it apart. Like, these are nerds. Community, it's not like that. It's just like, we're at college. Hey, where's the science lab? Can you direct me to the history class, please? And, yeah, Community beats out The Good Place just because Dan Harmon is the destroyer of... He is the murderer of humor in the 2010s. Every show he's been involved with is an insult to comedy, an insult to what can be considered funny. And, so yeah, Community beats out The Good Place easily, no question even. Alright. It's a battle of the titans, round 4. This is the moment you've been waiting for. The Office versus Community. The Office. In one corner, we have a show about boring people working an office job that they hate. In the other corner, you have a show about boring people who are at a community college and don't inherently hate it, but they don't do anything that's worth watching. They're just at a college.
Oh, man.
And she's Jewish?
So what? The Office versus Community. This is going to be hard, really, because if The Office wins, then that's proving that Dan Harmon made a show that's funnier than another show, which is hard to admit. I will say that. But if Community wins, then I'm implying that Steve Carell is funnier than Dan Harmon. It's also hard to admit. Either way I lose. Either way I have to admit that one thing is better than another thing, and they're not equally bad. And I can't tie them because that's not how bracket lists work. This is like when I went to a baseball game once and they just kept getting the same score over and over again, and it just kept going into extra innings. And because you can't have a tie in baseball, because it's a competitive major league sport, I had to sit like 5 extra hours, and I never even heard who won. And like by the time it left, like half the stadium, like 3/4 of the stadium had gone because there was nothing left to do, and they just had to keep repeating, "Hey, halftime stretch," even though it was like 10 extra innings. I hate competitive stuff because like it can't be a tie, and I want to tie The Office and Community so bad. They are the destroyers of what is funny. They're the massacre of the of creativity and imagination, and they just obliterate everything in their path. And they both have virulent fan bases who will defend them to no end. Obviously, with Community, it's a little more niche because Dan Harmon is like a counterculture figure. I'm so against the grain, even though he is the grain. He's the only like, what grain are you fighting against, Dan? Community's fan base is a little more seclusive, but The Office is everywhere. You can't escape The Office. There's no escaping The Office, because it's a show designed to say, look, Pamela from The Office is just like someone at my job. Kevin from The Office is just like someone at my job. And, the reason a sitcom like Taxi works is because nobody has someone like Latka at their job. He's just a goofball, and he's just there to be funny. But The Office and Community both function on relatability, one for the college set, one for the management set. Which one do I pick? Which one is the worst sitcom ever? The crappiest, most exploitative, hackneyed, lazy, fucking abomination of the sitcom form that's ever been aired. Ooh, it's The Office.
I declare bankruptcy!
The Office has been the juggernaut in this competition so far. It is a sitcom that is so empty and dry and tasteless and repetitive and sludgy that it's just beat out the competition everywhere it's been. It won against Modern Family, won against MASH, won against The Big Bang Theory. These are my least favorites of all time, but The Office went out against them, and so there's no reason why The Office can't also win out against Community. Congratulations to the Dunder Mifflin Purple People Eater. You're the least funny show that's ever been on TV, at least as far as sitcoms go. Again, not cartoon sitcoms. Those are a whole nother bag. Might do a bracket list for those because there's so fucking many of them, and they just don't stop. But The Office beats out Community. I have to say that The Office beats out Community because it really just does. It is worse than every other show. It is the worst show. The Office is the kind of show that will melt your eyeballs and turn your brain into a pasty sludge. Don't watch it, I guess, is the conclusion I can draw. And this is not at all to say that Community is a good show. It is worse than every other show on here with the exception of The Office. Worse than MASH, Big Bang Theory, Modern Family, Goldbergs, 30 Rock, Good Place, Superstore, Last Man Standing, Two Broke Girls even. I find it strange that Two Broke Girls didn't even make it past the first round, but then again, I guess when you're competing with the Big Bang Theory, you don't stand much of a chance. I just can't in good conscience not put The Office at the end. I just can't say that there is something worse than The Office out there. The Office is like, it's the kind of show where you just are like, who thought this was good? Who thought that this, The Office, with Dwight Schrute, was something that would be entertaining and fun? And like, it's The Office. Hey, it's The Office. The Office is the funniest show known to man. Hey, it's The Office. I watch it whenever I feasibly can. Steve Carell and Dwight Schrute working at the Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. I watch The Office. I wish it was still on. I wish it was still on. Hey, it's The Office. Ooh, The Office is the funniest show known to man. Hey, it's The Office. I watch it whenever I feasibly can. So yeah, that's the bracket list of worst sitcoms of all time, in my opinion anyway. If you want to do this yourself, it's pretty fun. I've never experimented around with bracket lists or that kind of thing before, but it's kind of fun. I kind of see why people are into this somewhat, so it's a fun format. It's kind of like tic-tac-toe or, something like that. So, yeah, The Office is the worst thing. It's just, ooh. And I'm sure that if I do an animated sitcom sequel to this, then, the winner of that won't be worse than The Office. But The Office, ladies and gentlemen, I kind of saw this coming from a mile off when I started this. I was just like, if there's a show on here that can actually beat The Office, and again, I tried my best to pick, like, the worst. I was like, if there's a show on here that can actually beat The Office, then I don't know what to say. But, yeah, so that's been the 20 worst, 16 worst sitcoms bracket list. Tell me what you think. Do you think that my decisions on every round were good? I don't know. That said, that's going to do it. Again, this isn't like a review of any of these sitcoms individually. I could only give a few, base descriptions of them, because, I could do a review for all of these, pretty much. I think sitcoms are an interesting medium, and they've developed and changed a lot since the end of Seinfeld, and, I don't know what's next for them, to be quite honest. I don't know how they keep existing in this weird kind of limbo. Yeah, I'm gonna have to say that'll do it for this one. Write to Nicholas Cicada, 1424 Columbine Street, number 1, Denver, Colorado 80206. You want to get your hands on some comics that are going to be a lot funnier than The Office. If you're into actual humor with actual jokes, then check out Nicholas Comics. That's right, the best comics in Denver. That said, I'm gonna go douse my eyes out with bleach, because just looking at the names of these abysmal monstrosities is enough to drive anyone just up the wall with how bad they are. These are bad shows, and I would not recommend watching any of them. Or if you must, just put a blindfold and earplugs on while watching them, and you should be fine. Sayonara, suckers.